of 48 and 49, the deep snow, according to the recollections of our father, Newell A. Johnson, who had 3,500 sheep out here on the desert. I shall never forget the winter of 48, 49. We had 2 herds of sheep on the desert. The snow at the end of 48 was quite deep, but not yet a problem. On January 15, 1949, I was on my way to the herd. I had a new pickup loaded with 1 ton of cottonseed cake for the sheep, supplies for the camps, and 2 herders, Art Smith from Mount Pleasant and Sherm Rasmussen from Chester. 2 of the men at the herd wanted to go home for a vacation. Sherm and Art were to replace them. It was snowing and blowing so hard west of Delta we couldn't see the road more than 50 yards ahead. Seeing a large object in the road, we stopped a few feet from the object, which turned out to be a 2-ton truck belonging to Osmond Crowther, which turned out to be from Fountain Green. In front of it was a Shiv pickup belonging to Arvard Agard. Snow had blown into the engine of Arvard's truck, shorting out the wiring and causing the motor to die. Parley Madsen, who was driving Osmond's truck, had stopped to give assistance to Arvard, and while stopped, his truck suffered the same fate and refused to start. This happened about 1 p.m. The snow was drifting so badly that it took us 2 hours with 3 shovels to remove enough snow to get my truck past the other 2. All 5 people then got in the cab of my pickup, and we proceeded west. Every little way we would get stuck in snow drifts and have to back up and hit the drift repeatedly until success attended our efforts. Having chains on the rear wheels, the cross chains would break under such stress, and I would have to crawl under the truck to wire them together. My coat and trousers, being wet from exposure, would be frozen stiff when I again entered the truck. The struggle lasted until daybreak, when we met 2 snowplows traveling toward Delta. The road west then was clear, so we reached Osmond's sheep camp. After a very welcome breakfast, we attempted to go back to see if we could rescue the incapacitated vehicles. The wind had drifted snow into the road so badly it was impossible to get within a mile of our objective, and we had to return to Osmond's camp. Imagine, if you can, 5 big men all night jammed in the cab of a pickup and glad to be sheltered from the bitter cold snow and wind. After lunch, my 2 passengers and I resumed our journey and succeeded in reaching my herd by nightfall. The highway was then impassable for 3 days. The sheep were also snowed in. All the grass and shrubs were covered with snow, and the sheep were starving. Had it not been for the cottonseed pellets I had, it would have been much worse. We trampled the snow with horses and vehicles sufficiently so we could scatter the pellets by horseback, and the sheep would compete in their efforts to get the most. As soon as I could get back to Delta, I purchased a big stack of hay and commenced hauling it out to the sheep. The roads were sometimes closed for almost a week at a time. The U.S. Army furnished some big cargo planes to deliver hay to the starving sheep. I was the first sheepman to fly hay from the Delta airport to my sheep. I would sit by the pilot and instruct him as to where we should deposit the hay. We made a trial run first and dropped the bales of hay as closest to the sheep as we dared. A dropped bale would kill a sheep if hit by it. In fact, a herder from, I believe, Beaver was killed from a falling bale during the winter. Now to Chris, and those of you who know her will agree with me that she's a chip off the old block. She's one of a kind.
Well, since tonight we seem to have a theme of using what you can and what you have, making the best out of everything, I think as we read these stories from our fathers and our other relatives who served out here on the desert, that we come from some pretty good stock, and I think they've taught us some excellent lessons. So this is another story that Dad wrote about the winter of 48 and 49, and shows the trials that they had to go through. And we think we have trials these days, but I think they were made of a lot sterner stuff than we are. A cross chain on the dual tires of one of my big trucks broke, caught, and severed the brake line. I bent the line double near the brake with a hammer and crushed it together so that the brake fluid couldn't run out. We then had brakes on 3 wheels, and I was able to drive it cautiously to Delta. I left it at a garage for repairs and secured transportation into Provo and home for one night. The next day I arrived at Delta about 1 p.m., took the repaired truck, loaded 7 tons of cottonseed cake on it, and started for the desert and my sheep camps again. The days were very short, and darkness overtook me when I was at least 5 miles from camp. As I made a right angle turn onto the road leading to my camp, the left rear wheel dropped off. At the garage where repairs were made, it had been necessary to remove the wheel before repairing the brake line. Whoever replaced the wheel failed to tighten the lug nuts, allowing the wheel to work loose and fall off. As a result, I had a 5-mile walk on a very cold night through the snow to the camp. The next day, we made 2 trips to the disabled vehicle in the other big truck, and on the way back, hauled the pellets to where the sheep were. That afternoon, I had one of the fellows take me to the mouth of Kings Canyon, where R.J. Reynolds Construction Camp was located, and where I hoped I could get help to reinstate the wheel on my disabled truck. After supper, the superintendent said there were 19 people, including 3 snowplows, stranded at Gene Allred's camp, located on Cowboy Pass, a distance of approximately 10 miles away. He had dispatched a Caterpillar bulldozer along with a pickup supply truck on a mission of rescue. He asked if I would accompany him in checking the progress of the rescue party. I gladly consented. Little did I know we would be gone 2 days and 2 nights on that mission. The wind was blowing snow into the road almost as fast as the bulldozer could clear it. When we caught up to the rescue crew, the wind was drifting the road full of snow so rapidly that we dared not try to return to the construction camp. So we followed the Caterpillar all night. We arrived at Allred's camp at 5 a.m. I have never seen a happier or more relieved group of people. They were scared, and it showed. Besides the 3 stranded snowplows, there were 4 automobiles. The stranded travelers included a lady who was about 6 months pregnant and a 5-year-old boy. At 7 a.m., we had all the snowplows and cars dug out, and the caravan began its journey toward Garrison with the Caterpillar leading the way. It was slow progress and took all day. We all stayed at Garrison that night, and the next morning parted company with the people going to Nevada and resumed our journey again the following the Cat toward the construction camp. It was sundown when we arrived. After a good meal provided by the camp cook and a good night's sleep, one of the camp mechanics and I gathered tools and equipment available at the camp, and by evening succeeded in repairing the broken wheel on my big truck so it was at least mobile. Later, it was necessary to replace the wheel and lugs. When I got back to town, I purchased an Arctic sleeping bag consisting of a down mummy bag which fitted inside an outer bag. I kept that sleeping bag in whichever truck I was using the remainder of the winter. I said I might starve to death, but I wasn't going to freeze to death. It was the 15th of March before the snow melted enough for the sheep to forage on their own. At the time the weather broke, I had a large stockpile of hay and pellets on hand at the herd, which we later hauled home. As a result of the severe weather, many hundreds of sheep died. Some were completely covered with snow and suffocated. As the snow melted, it exposed their bodies. Many were still standing, dead and frozen. As I recall, my loss was approximately 300. We were better off than most because we were in the proximity of the construction camp, and with their help succeeded in getting both of our herds adjacent to the highway where we could feed them hay and pellets. I engaged a room at the Old Southern Hotel in Delta most of February and part of March. Whenever the road was passable, I would transport a load of feed to my herds and would always return to Delta the same day. We never knew when the road would be open again. It could drift in overnight and maybe be closed a day or 2 until the Caterpillars and snowplows cleared them again. Each night I was in Delta, I would call home to see how my family was faring. It was a tremendous relief when spring finally showed its face and we could commence salvaging the remains of our flocks of sheep and cattle. There had never been such a severe winter in the history of the state of Utah, and it is my sincere hope that there never will be another like it. One experience of that nature is more than enough to last a lifetime. we were extremely fortunate to survive as well as we did.